I miss you guys. I hope you guys are having a really great week. I'm really excited for the new series that we're starting today called Average Pete. Average Pete is about...
Ahoy, kids' life!
Who are you? Why are you on my video?
Calm down there, you silly goose. I'm Rod, Tackle Box Rod.
Rod Tacklebox? That's your name? What kind of name is Rod Tacklebox?
Why, it's my name. You goofy guppy.
Guppy? What's a guppy?
It's a fish.
And how would you know that?
Because I'm a fisherman.
Well, I mean, I guess that explains the fishing rod you got here.
Well, it sure ain't for playing golf. Anyone who heard her talking about one of my heroes?
One of your heroes? Who is that?
Why, Peter, of course. He's a fisherman, a great fisherman. Back in his days, almost as good as me. Then one day, quicker than a starfish does a cartwheel, just drops out and all follows Jesus. Remind me a lot of my big brother.
You have a brother?
Hey, his name is Real.
Are you telling me your names are Rod and Real Tacklebox?
Sure, that's the name our parents gave us.
Interesting. Okay.
Susan, anyway, growing up in the big city, a captain, he worked his whole life. I remember when he was 5, he made a boat out of nothing. A bunch of pieces of toast and a roll of toilet paper. He called it SSTP. It clogged up our bathtub for weeks, but he grew up to know everything there was to know about boats and sailing. And he was on his way becoming a great captain when one day he gave his life to God.
Wow.
Yup. And he felt God telling him that he was needed elsewhere, that he had to drop everything to follow the Lord. So that's what he did. He left the Navy and everything and followed God. And now he's a preacher.
Wow, that's a really wild story. Today we're actually going to be talking about Peter. And that's the same thing that he does in the Bible. Just like your brother Real.
Peter was always a hero of ours growing up. He was willing to give up all to serve God. And that's how my brother Real and I want to live. Now, Real is a preacher, and I'm still living for God. As a fisherman. But I'm still willing to give it all to follow Jesus. Whatever he asks me to do, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, I'm really glad that you came by today. Will we see you again?
I think you may. I think I may hang around for a while during this Average Pete series. I see you later, kids.
Bye. It was nice to meet you. Well, anyway, today we're going to be talking about heroes in the Bible. I want you guys to think. Bible characters sometimes seem like superheroes, don't they? When we think of Bible characters, they seem larger than life. They seem unreal. They're never sad. They have faith that can move mountains. Isn't it amazing? This is the picture that we often get. When we think of our favorite Bible stories, we think of miracles that are happening, or we think of wars that are being won, enemies that are being vanquished. These are our favorite stories in the Bible. You see it with David and Goliath, Daniel in the lion's den. Now, I love these stories. But the truth is that the famous characters in the Bible aren't superheroes. They made mistakes. They said dumb things. They had problems. The truth is they were just average people like you and me, who God used to do amazing things. They had problems. They had temptations. They made mistakes, but God used them anyway. That's the case with the character we're going to be talking about in this series, Peter. Now, Peter was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. In Acts chapter 2, we see Peter preach an amazing sermon. In fact, it's the very first sermon ever preached for the church. Now, when he was done preaching, over 3,000 people decided to follow God. Talk about an amazing first sermon. But the thing is, people a few years before this never would have imagined that Peter would have done something like this, that he would have stood and lead and taught people to come to faith. Now, today we're going to look back at the very beginning of Peter's life. Today we're going to look at our first introduction to Peter. Peter was a fisherman. We find him in Luke chapter 5, standing along the side of a lake alongside of his boat. That's where we find Peter. Well, I mean, his name was actually Simon. Jesus called him Peter, so that's what we're going to be calling him here today too. So Peter was standing along the side of his boat as a fisherman. Now, being a fisherman wasn't a job that was given to people who were considered to be important or special. It was just an average job for an average guy. So that's why we're going to be calling Peter Average Pete in this series. So one night, Peter and his friends went out fishing. They were out fishing all night long. As they come in the morning, Peter sees Jesus standing on the shore. Jesus comes up to Peter and asks if he can use his boat to preach to the crowds. Peter said yes, so Jesus got into his boat. Peter takes the boat a little bit out from shore, and as he's there, Jesus starts preaching to the crowds. When he's done, Jesus tells Peter to take his boat into the deep water and let down his nets to see if he can catch any fish. Now remember, Peter was a professional fisherman. He knew way more about fishing than anyone else. Peter said to Jesus, "We've been out here all night. We were in that exact spot. We didn't catch anything. I know there's absolutely no point in letting down my nets, but because you said to, we will." And Peter made a good decision. He took his boat, he rowed out, he went into the deep water, he let down his nets, and they caught so many fish, they could barely get the fish into the boat. Peter was amazed. He fell down on his knees at Jesus' feet, and he said, "Master, please go away from me. I'm a sinner, and I don't deserve to be around you." But Jesus said to him, "Don't be afraid. Follow me. From now on, you will fish for men." So they rowed the boat back to shore. As they got out of the boat, Peter left behind everything. He left behind his boat, the nets, the fish, and he followed Jesus, and he never looked back. Now there's some really cool things that we can learn from this story. And the first one is that God uses average people. There was nothing special about Peter or Peter's job. He was just an average guy who decided to follow Jesus and give up everything he had to follow him. He became special when he decided to follow Jesus. See, average people in God's hands become heroes. You might feel like you're just a regular kid. Well, Peter was just a regular guy. But when you decide to obey God and follow him, amazing things can happen. Now, you might not be able to fly or melt steel with your eyes or push a train with your bare hands. But when you follow God, amazing things happen. See, God uses average people to do big things. But the secret is we must be willing to give everything to follow God. See, when Peter chose to follow Jesus, he left his old life behind. He left his boat, his nets, his whole fishing business, everything he had when he followed Jesus. Now that's the same thing that we must do. We must leave behind our old sinful habits. We must leave behind our plans and our dreams, because God's plans and dreams are so much bigger and better than any plans or dreams that we could ever have. See, we must be willing to give up everything in order to follow Jesus, and he can use us to do extraordinary things. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for using average people like us to do amazing things. I pray if we have anything in our life that we're holding on to, that we just put it at your feet and we follow you, God, because you can use us to do amazing things for your kingdom. I love you, God. Amen. Bye, Kids Life. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great week.